Henry Olsen is a senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, a think tank in Washington, D.C. His pre-election predictions of 2008, 2010, 2012, 2014 were praised for their remarkable accuracy. His 2016 predictions, which was a black swan, were more accurate than virtually any other major analyst or commentator. He writes regularly for American Greatness, and his latest book is The Working Class Republican, Ronald Reagan and the Return of Blue-Collar Conservatism. Obviously, you can find it on Amazon.com. He is one of my favorite observers of elections. Have we got it? There he is. I haven't got him on the screen in front of me. There you go. But at least I can hear you. How you doing, Henry? It's good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's been one of the most interesting political years I can remember, so it's been so much fun to actually get to comment on it. So let's start with the book. Again, Ronald Reagan and the Return of Blue-Collar Conservatism. You say that in the book that Trump has recaptured Reagan's magic, and you're not uncritical of Trump, but let's start with that. How is that true? How is it true that Trump has recaptured Reagan's magic?
Well, yeah, what Reagan's magic was talking about the average person of America and putting their hopes, their fears, their desires, their lives at the center of his politics. He wasn't talking about helping them by helping other people, like helping entrepreneurs or job creators. He spoke directly to them. And that's what Trump does at his best, is that when Trump was running, he was focusing on the average person who felt that they had gotten a raw deal from both parties over the past 2 decades. And he said, I'm going to bring you back. I'm the person who understands you. I'm the person who's going to put you at the center of my politics. And that meant that he was the first person since Reagan to carry areas that are dominated by that sort of person. The 5 states in the Midwest that everybody but a couple of us were shocked that he ended up carrying, because he was able to talk to them in a way that no Republican since Reagan had.
And that is a very different, the kind of Reagan mythology was that he supported the trickle-down idea that he was going to help the corporations and the corporations would help people. But that was really imposed on him. That was not the way he talked to people. And he always supported the kind of safety net that keeps, middle-class people from falling into the underclasses. He always supported that, right?
Right. No, he always supported it. In fact, during his presidency, he expanded it in some ways. He increased taxes in a couple of ways in order to support the existing programs, particularly his 1983 Social Security deal, which 35 years later is still the deal that has financed our basic retirement program. Reagan always talked about workers. He always talked about the average person. He always rejected, even in his autobiography in 1989, An American Life, he rejected efforts to paint him as a supply-sider. He said that he never fully understood what it was and exactly what agreed all their tenets. And then he returned to the fact that he had been saying many things the supply-siders embraced decades before they ever went to college.
And then we're talking about your book, The Working Class Republican, Ronald Reagan and the Return of Blue-Collar Conservatism, available on Amazon. You then say that some of Trump's policies are actually the opposite of Reagan's. What do you mean?
Well, that when Trump is talking about eliminating things like NAFTA, Reagan was a free trader but a fair trader. Okay. And Reagan actually came up with the idea that became NAFTA. When Reagan announced his presidential campaign in 1980, he talked about creating what he called a common market between Canada, America, and Mexico. Nobody had proposed it before, Ronald Reagan. So when Trump focuses on tariffs and protectionism, he takes a Reagan-esque insight, which is that the economy has to work for all people, and takes it to an extreme that Reagan would never have taken it to.
Okay. On the immigration front, let's leave Reagan out of it because things change over time. But Trump seems to be saying, as far as I can make out what Trump is saying at this point, he seems to be saying, he's going to let the dreamers stay, but he really wants high security, which is represented by this wall, an end to chain migration, an end to lotteries for diversity. Right. It seems to me that he is standing right where the core of the American public is standing, and that basically our elites don't stand there. Is that a fair, accurate?
I think that's that if you were to take the center of American public opinion, it would be don't give the people who stay here citizenship, but let them have legal residence. Don't deport them, but make sure that this doesn't happen again, which is to say have real border security, have real employment security, and make sure that the people who come here want to contribute and not live off the welfare or the social safety net. And that's what ending chain migration is about, is that rather than bringing in grandma and grandpa and your uncle, people who may be 68 and require social support, make sure that the people who are legally allowed to come here are people who can produce for the American economy on the basis of their skills and their work set, and not simply have one person's ability to come here create 10 legal rights to come here, whether or not those people do want to or can produce for the American society.
So if Trump has got that right, if he's got the people right on this, obviously you can't speak for them, but what, in your opinion, are guys like Lindsey Graham and Jeff Flake and Dick Durbin, what are they talking about? Why are they taking this position?
Well, I think it's different for different people. That the ideological libertarian position, which is where Jeff Flake has always been, is basically open borders, is one that says that citizenship doesn't matter. We shouldn't look to somebody coming from our country any differently than somebody who's already there. So for Jeff Flake, he's just acting as an ideologue. For the Democratic Party, you have the political desire to have open borders, which is say they believe it's in their political advantage to continue to have less skilled migration come into the country and to have more and more people who are not necessarily immediately acclimatized to the American point of view. So you have different reasons that coalesce around a similar policy perspective.
Okay. Before we talk about the midterms, I just want to get your assessment of Trump's first year. I mean, I feel there seems to be this division between Trump, the person, and the fact of his accomplishments, which seem to be conservative accomplishments that any normal conservative could appreciate, and there seem to be a lot of them. How do you feel the first year has gone for him?
I think the first year economically has been pretty much what you would expect from the intersection between a Cruz and a Jeb Bush administration. It's been definitely right of center. It's been definitely orthodox Republican. Most of the stuff that scared people was not done on the foreign policy. Again, despite a style of diplomacy. I doubt that Cruz would have called Kim Jong-il or Kim Jong-un Rocket Man. But effectively what he's doing is being both tough but willing to negotiate. And we're still in NATO. We're still upholding our commitments. So even on foreign policy, it hasn't been that much different. It's been strangely conventional.
Now, the only thing that has been unconventional is this form of communication, certainly the Twitter stuff. Do you think electorally, is that hurting him or helping him?
It's largely been hurting him.
You think so?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the use of Twitter is a bad thing. And I don't think going after the media, as long as it's done in the way that in the clips that you just aired, is. But what he's been doing is fighting battles he didn't need to fight and picking on people that are really either beneath the dignity of the president or doing it in a way that's beneath the dignity of the president. And that's been hurting him. Now, if he were to go through a year where he didn't comment on Mika Brzezinski's alleged facelift or taking issue with, a basketball player's father for not being grateful enough, you might very well see people focus more on the accomplishments and on the personality. But so far, I think Twitter is the major reason why he's at a 40% approval rating as opposed to a 45 or a 48% approval rating.
Wow. Dan Henninger wrote a column, I think it was last week, at the Wall Street Journal, where he said that the resistance, the strategy of the resistance, now comes clear as the midterms hove into sight, basically. And the strategy is make him so personally hateful that people will ignore his accomplishments and vote against him for that reason. In your opinion, looking forward, is that working right now?
It is working right now. That if I were going to look at the midterm right now, I would say it's going to be a very good year for the Democrats. That the only question is the degree of gain. I'd say it's 50-50 if they win the House. But even if they don't, it would be such a narrow majority for the Republicans that it would be difficult to pass anything meaningful. Republicans would lose a number of the governorships in blue or purple states that they hold right now. And the historic opportunity to gain 5, 6, 7 Senate seats, which is what is presented with a highly favorable map, would be frittered away, so that maybe they gain a seat or two. But gaining a seat or two when you're fighting on 9 Democrat-held states that Donald Trump won would be considered a massive defeat.
Is there still time to change that?
There is, but I think it mainly has to come from the president. That it's going to be extremely difficult for Republicans in Congress to run apart from the president, in part because the president dominates the agenda, and secondly, because of our extreme partisanship. That a lot of Democrats tried to run away from Obama, but even Democrats who opposed Obamacare got swept up in the 2010 tide because it didn't matter that they had voted no. It was the party they wanted to punish. If Donald Trump can focus less on division and more on things that bring people together, and he can communicate in a more presidential manner, if he can get his approval rating up into the mid 40s as opposed to 39, 40%,
Yeah.
well, then I think it could be actually a fairly decent midterm, single digit losses in the House, 4 or 5 Senate seat gain, holding your own in governorships. That would be considered a victory because presidents almost always do poorly in their first midterm. The only question is the degree. If it's just a historic mild loss, that would be a massive win for the president.
So you're essentially confirming what some never Trumpers, or whatever you want to call them, some of the conservative anti-Trumpers have said, that the president is maybe doing good things now, but long term he is hurting himself simply by being himself. Is that fair?
Well, there's elements of himself that help him a lot. That if the president, the sort of things that you just played, his banter with the press,
Right,
does not annoy people. It's the stuff where he's unduly personal, where he's unduly picking on people who don't deserve to be picked on, and doing it in ways that are frankly crude.
Yeah.
And if the president can talk frankly and honestly like a normal person and show anger when it's appropriate, but not be mean and vindictive, that's a different person. And that, I think, would work in his favor. But that's not what we saw in 2017.
Yeah. If the Democrats win the House, do you think they'll actually go for impeachment?
Yeah, I do. I think,
do you think that? Yeah.
By go for impeachment, I think that articles will be filed and they will begin to have hearings because it will satisfy their base, and it's in their narrow political interest to continue to do it. Whether they will pass those articles out is another matter, but I do think that they will file articles, and Nancy Pelosi will give authorization to have impeachment hearings because it keeps the focus on the personality of the president, which is what they want to do going into 2020.
One of the things that Reagan said, I remember after, I can't remember where it was, one of the elections when the Democrats won, he said, "Don't worry, because they can't help but govern from the left and they'll destroy themselves." Do you think that I know this is a long-term question, and I'm only asking you to speculate, and I will not hold you to it, but do you think that a win of the House for the Democrats may actually keep Trump in power for another term?
Absolutely. Because, look, the reason Donald Trump is in office is because about 20% of Americans didn't like either he or Hillary Clinton.
Right.
And they waited till the end, but they decided that they would rather have Donald Trump than Hillary Clinton. And the $64,000 question for Democrats is, was that because of Hillary's personality, or is that because of Hillary's policies? That's essentially the question that Republicans have had to face. Their answer to Mitt Romney was, it was the man, not the message. And then everyone who ran on the Romney message lost to Donald Trump in the primaries because guess what? It was the message, not the person. And I think the same thing. I think the same thing is true with the Democrats. Is that if they nominated somebody else who was basically on the Clinton platform but not Hillary Clinton, that they would find exactly the same thing happen to them as happened to the Republicans after 2012.
Wow. I got to say, Henry, every time I talk to you about this, every time I read your stuff at American Greatness or on National Review, it clarifies the entire the field, because there's so much emotion going on and not enough observation, and you really do a great job. Henry Olsen, the author of The Working Class Republican, Ronald Reagan and the Return of Blue-Collar Conservatism. You can find it on Amazon.com. Henry, thanks for coming. I hope you come back nearer the day.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me on again, Andrew.
All right. I'll see you. Really interesting. Just a great political observer. There aren't enough of them.